Hello, and welcome to our Simply Learn Leadership webinar. What does it take to be part of a global marketing team today? Our guest is Sandeep Menon. He's a senior marketing director of Google, and our host for today is Mark Moran, the chief marketing officer of Simply Learn. Before I introduce Mark to introduce Sandeep, I'd like to give you a few instructions on how to use the webinar controls in WebEx. We will be logging your questions from the Q&A box, so use that question mark button to access that. Ask your question. We will keep track of it, and Mark and Sandeep will address that in the Q&A later in the session. They may take a few questions live during the broadcast. And in the chat window, you can also contact us. Use all panelists so that we all see it, and we will be logging those as well. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Mark to introduce Sandeep.
Everyone, welcome to our webinar today. Thank you very much for attending and for your interest. We're hoping to have a really lively discussion. I'm thrilled to have Sandeep joining us today. Sandeep is a 13-plus year veteran of Google with steadily more senior roles. He presently leads the global marketing efforts for Google Payments, as well as Google Play across Chrome, Android, and other platforms. He previously was a country marketing director in India, and again has had sort of steadily increasing roles internationally. Now runs an international team from Google's headquarters here in Mountain View. Prior to all that, some time at SAP and Oracle way back when. He comes from MBA from INSEAD and BE from NIT Karnataka, which of course is where Bangalore is, where Simply Learn's headquarters is. So Sandeep, it's really great to have you aboard. We appreciate you taking the time. I know you've got a very busy life and then quite a global operation that you're running.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, great. And so we're gonna talk a chunk about global and what sort of global means. But I think as the saying says, think globally, act locally. So I think we'll begin by sort of generally talking about marketing and marketing career progression, and then sort of expand out from there and talk about some of the sort of extra challenges and opportunities with managing global teams or being a marketer who's trying to address a global audience. So I think what would be sort of great is to sort of start a little bit with your kind of career progression and background, and how you kind of got to where you are now, and we'll kind of take it from there.
So, okay, I'll try to do that justice. So, like many folks from India, at least of my generation, I started off, I studied engineering, mechanical engineering, and my first job was as a software company, initially developing banking software, right? So very different from the marketing role that I have right now. Post that, I moved on to SAP, where I had a real interest in the business side of stuff while I loved technology. What really interested me was how you can bridge technology with the business side and how you can actually develop products, but also kind of bring them to market, which is why I made a shift to product management. Did that at SAP for a few years, and then had the opportunity to go and do my MBA. Post MBA, I must say that my joining Google in a marketing role was in a large respect accidental. As you know, like post MBA, you want to do something different. So initially, when I was interviewing with Google, they wanted me to kind of interview for the product management ladder at Google. And having done an MBA, you're young and foolish, and you feel that you want to kind of do something different. And I said, look, I've done product management before. Is there something else that I could do? And the person who was helping me through the hiring process, she said, there is something called product marketing. Are you interested in that? And I said, yeah, why not? Let's give it a try. And that led me to join product marketing at Google, initially out of London. And I've been there since, as you said, it's been 13 plus years now, enjoying every minute of it now, learning, still learning, which I think is the most important aspect we all look for in our jobs.
Yeah, I'm already thinking of like 20 different ways I want to take your background and your narrative, but I'll focus on just a couple of those. One, and first I'll park the fact that, so I come from more of a liberal arts background and more of the soft, touchy-feely. Unfortunately, I'm somewhat analytical, so that helped me get into marketing. But you coming from the sort of the other end altogether, which is engineering. And we certainly in our marketing team have a ton of people who come in from more of the engineering background. So I think let's park that for a minute, because I think that's an interesting, how one progresses from that core skill set and education versus the other. But I think another area that I do think is sort of interesting is the difference between product management and product marketing. And those are often quite distinct career paths, except in companies, of course, like CPG and Google in your case, where you have sort of that Uber product manager who's essentially a business line manager, owns the P&L and owns, kind of everything. But in your career, as you kind of initially as a more junior product manager, switching over to product marketing, what was that like for you, and sort of what were the skills, what were the skill points that you really had to focus on to kind of stretch for that new role?
Yeah. So, Mark, I think you're spot on in saying that, like, there is different companies approach it differently. But if you were to look at it broad strokes, for me, the big difference was in a product management role, you spend a lot of time working with engineers and developers to bring products to life. Whereas in product marketing, you do play a role in that initial development phase. But I think the real action starts once you have the semblance of a product and you got to bring it to market. So I always and there are a lot of junior folks who often have discussions on this topic and ask, okay, what career path do I take? And I think it comes down to, as you said, like what really interests you, right? Even though there is overlap, like if what interests you is like the sausage making of building a product and like understanding a PRD and seeing how we can translate that, bringing a product to life, I think the product management role is what suits you, and the skill set needed for that are like having a little bit of an engineering background, deep understanding of where you want to kind of take your product to, and ability to, again, work with engineers and cross-functional teams. However, if you feel that your interest is in taking something to market, like in telling a story, in like taking a product and building a narrative around it, like then you should definitely consider product marketing. Right. And the skill set needed for that are the ability to kind of look at a product and see how is it a user will perceive it? Like, what are the real needs of a user that we are trying to kind of fill? And then how do you build a story and narrative around it and get it to market?
Right. I couldn't agree more that, and obviously a lot of things in life, it starts with passion. And if you find yourself in a role and it's drudgery and it doesn't feel natural, then those are very important indicators to pay attention to. They do start diverging pretty quickly, I think, those two paths.
Very true.
And particularly in sort of modern, more product marketing and acquisition marketing, where you've got a bunch of discrete skills, whether it's brand marketing or PPC or social, et cetera. And so maybe to talk a little bit more about, for you, that evolution into product marketing, Um, were you initially responsible for sort of one subset of disciplines, and now obviously you sort of manage all the above, and kind of how did that evolution go from engineer, product management, product marketing, suddenly well, not suddenly but over time,
Yeah.
managing all these different disciplines?
Yeah. So you are a CMO running a global company, so I think you relate to this. At that stage, essentially, you're a generalist. Like you need to have like multiple skill sets in many ways. You are not a master of anything. It's more about like team management and like having an understanding of each discipline. For my career, means early on when I did product marketing, the thing that really helped me is that I come from a technology background, so I was able to leverage that. I was able to connect with the product folks working on the one product that I was working on, and then leverage those skills. What the skills that I had at that time was essentially, like I said, a tech background. So most of the work I did at that stage was looking at the product, understanding the technology, and saying, okay, how is it that we can now position it and get people to use it? Post that, like I shifted my focus on building our small business marketing efforts in EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Google. And the skill set that I needed there, which was at that time new, was what you pointed out, acquisition marketing. We essentially wanted to go out and acquire or get millions of small businesses to sign up for Google's products. And that is a completely new skill set. It is what today is referred to as growth marketing. And the thing that helped me there is that coming from an engineering background, the analytical side of stuff interested me, and that is a strength that I could bring to the table. But there was a whole host of stuff that I learned as a part of that opportunity. Right? And I think like for folks who really like seeing a business grow, driving growth, that's a fantastic career opportunity, right? So, and any tech company that you see around now, you need that skill set. How do you take a product and then essentially acquire customers, be it like, depending upon the kind of product you have, it could be consumers, it could be small businesses, it could be big businesses, but how do you do it at scale? And that was super useful for me. It was at that time that I realized that if you look at the marketing discipline, I think there's a product marketing aspect of it. There is the what I call the growth or analytical aspect of it. One aspect of the business, which, or at least from a marketing point of view, that I felt I could learn a little bit more, was the brand marketing aspect of it. Right. So I initially took on some added responsibility for driving some of the Google's consumer products in EMEA. But then I had an opportunity to go and set up the marketing team in India, which is more of a CMO kind of role, where you need to wear all of the hats. And I would say that I spent a lot of my time there in also building upon the brand marketing part of the skill set. Because as you grow to a more senior role, you need to have all of those skill sets.
Right. I'll confess I'm somebody who's not someone who reads business book after business book. I know some people really, that's kind of a thing that they do. But I have read a couple that I think are pretty seminal. I know one for me was called Leadership Pipeline.
Uh-huh.
It deals with career progression, and it's kind of takes it all the way, from an individual contributor, and then, if you're in a global corporation, literally all the way up to like a division leader, and, all the way up to president. And one of the interesting concepts is at each stage, particularly going from an individual contributor to a manager, how do you make room for the people that you manage? And it's, if you've most people, you reach that point because you've mastered a specific skill, and you're recognized as someone who's really great at whatever, and the company sees potential in you, and you're leaning in, and you've got all the attributes that they like, and now you've got one or two people beneath me, but I'm used to being the expert who does everything themselves. And so, a big milestone is I need to figure out how to shift some of that to them and give them the space to fail. Give them the mentorship that they need, and not constantly be kind of coming back in and I'll just do the work for you or I'll just correct you. And it's sort of a concept that if you don't create more space above someone, they'll only rise exactly to the level that you give them space to.
Yes.
And then meanwhile, if you're doing that, not only you not giving them growth opportunity and not expanding, but then you yourself are not growing because you're still doing the old role you used to do.
Yes.
And then, do you have that experience?
Absolutely, it's a fascinating, point in anybody's career, and I've made my fair share of mistakes there, right? So, and that is the way you learn, and it's also now as leaders, and I'm pretty sure you see this as well. Is like you see that play out on a day-to-day basis. You see multiple extremely smart individuals, superstars at what they do, wanting to grow their skill sets, wanting to manage a team. You give a team and they struggle. They struggle because they're so good at doing something. And very often I feel that the reason they struggle is because they overplay their strengths. Like you said, like being a manager, one of the first things that's important is you need to step back, give space. But because you're used to kind of being an individual contributor, being at best of what you do, the immediate tendency that you have is to micromanage and to almost kind of orchestrate each and every move, and that can be stifling for anybody, right? Especially for a smart individual. So I think it is a process which many companies do not invest as much in, and even at Google, I see that like that is a big shift we have made over the years. Earlier, it was like as many of us had in our early careers, baptism by fire. You manage a team and you either burn or you fly. It's a pretty, I would say, learning in the job kind of thing. But nowadays we invest a lot of time. A lot of time at Google is now really spent on mentoring, coaching, our junior or first-time people managers to be good leaders, right? So, in fact, if like this whole repository of studies we have done to determine what are the attributes that make somebody successful. So you're spot on. It's something which you need to kind of everything you said, like how do you switch to a mode where you take a step back, give people underneath you an opportunity to grow, understand where you need to kind of contribute, stop being an individual contributor, be a people leader. Very important transition. Couldn't emphasize how important it is, and the skills that you learn there will serve you extremely well as you get more and more people underneath you and you grow in your career.
Right. And the next level is then you're managing managers.
So
that's a whole other thing of how do you, again, give them enough space, but make sure that there is obviously a goal alignment and that they themselves are getting training. And so the things sort of get meta with each new layer. There's sort of meta management that ends up happening. So maybe we'll return to that. But I think what might be helpful. So first of all, most of our our sort of core learners are in their kind of late 20s to 30s, people that are somewhere 3 to 7 years into their career. I'm going to guess that most of the hundreds of people that are watching this are kind of in that range. So I think a lot of our discussion we can probably angle a little bit more towards early in the career. But then I think people will be obviously fascinated to know what that trajectory looks like, and so they can sort of think ahead and what may come 3, 5, 10 years from now for them. But I think a good point now to sort of give a little context for everybody, if you don't mind, would you go in a little bit to like your organization itself, just so we get a sense of and the scope of it and kind of how you divide and conquer amongst your how your team is set up?
Yeah. So, I run a global marketing team, so I have team members here in the Bay Area, in New York, in Atlanta, in Singapore, and in India. So the way and this is related to the point that we made earlier, right? Like if I were to look across marketing, I feel that anybody who reaches the leadership stage has one core area of strength, and then they hire great people who can supplement the other stuff. You need to have a basic understanding of the areas, but you can't be a fantastic growth marketer plus a brand marketer plus a product marketer, right? So, and I feel that like that is one of the things that, especially early in your career, take risks, try different things, and then try to find out what is the area that really interests you, and invest in that and be a really good expert in that, right? So if I were to think about my team and most marketing teams at Google, we each global marketing team has, I would say, three main functions, right? So we talked about the first one, which is product marketing. A lot of that is working with product managers and engineers and trying to figure out like how do you position a product, how do you bring a product to life and take it to market, right?
The next feature you need to really drive growth,
that is right. Like understanding what your consumers and users want, being tuned to the market needs, feed that in, but really telling a story about like what the product is, what it stands for, etc. Right? That is so we have a fairly large product marketing team. Then comes the second part, which we talked about, which is growth marketing, acquisition marketing. All of our products, like be it Google Pay, we talked about Android, Chrome, YouTube, any Google product. There's a bunch of folks who really kind of obsess about, okay, so, and this goes from country to country, is like, how do you really think about now that you have a product, now that you have a successful product, how do you grow it? Like, what are the drivers for growth? Like looking at the funnel, all of that kind of wonderful thing. How do you drive growth? By obsessing our each and every pixel, like, and it's a very, very interesting skill set and requires certain competencies. So that would be the second big part of the team, and then the third part is what we talked about. I have a brand team which is responsible for creative development, which is responsible for almost painting our vision and telling that story. Again, like, the people who are successful at that, like, they're unique, they are fantastic storytellers, they are big picture thinkers, and they don't obsess about, like, their skill set is not necessarily in the product marketing or the growth side of stuff. Their thing is like how to kind of tell a really, really compelling story, and that is also equally important. So I have a few folks who focus on that. They work with our agencies and come up with like really fantastic creative, which we can then deploy.
And so generally speaking, you're kind of across the team divides across the product acquisition and brand, and then with sub teams under that.
That's right. Yes. And then at Google, what we also do is that we really like, and you touched upon it in the beginning, right? Which is like, you run a global team, but you need to act locally, because insights in each market are very different. Like what a consumer needs in India is different from what a consumer needs in, let's say, the US, right? And even within these countries, there are differences. So we also invest in building local teams, and we do empower these local teams. The local teams are ultimately the experts in their country, and are responsible for making sure that they feed in the requirements from there, but also launching and deploying campaigns in countries.
Right. Local country managers are doing the hiring for the local folks.
Absolutely, yes.
Right.
So they are in. So if you look at global roles like the one I have at Google, we are organized by product areas. So you have a few product areas that you're responsible for, whereas in a country, you essentially are responsible for, like, at least as a country, like a CMO of the country, which is what I did in India. You're responsible for all functions and all products in that country. So that, I think, is the difference between the two roles.
Got it. So I've been taking a peek. We've got a ton of questions that are coming in. And a lot of them are around, again, sort of career paths around product marketing and career paths around more acquisition, so product management and acquisition marketing. And so perhaps the way to sort of tackle this, there's both your own experience, but maybe also in your team, kind of how you hire and how the progression would be for someone on your team who's doing let's start with the more traditional product management. If you're hiring at a sort of a junior level, again, sort of the core skill sets that you're looking for, and then, what are the important milestones for somebody, again, either based on your own experience or what you're seeing in your team. Let's do that first to make sure we're hitting a lot of these questions that are coming in.
Yeah, so every company has a different hiring philosophy. At Google, one of the things we follow, especially for junior roles, is we tend to hire what we call athletes, right? The stuff that we evaluate is, it's not like one particular marketing skill set, but essentially look at, are you a well-rounded person, right? Are you curious? Do you want to learn new stuff? Do you believe in the power of technology to kind of improve people's lives? So the general skills that we look at are, you kind of assess your general cognitive ability. You look at how you approach situations, and we also pay a lot of attention to not just what you have done, but the how you do it, right? So I cannot emphasize that enough. Like we all want to work with, and that is one of the reasons I'm still at Google. I love the team that I work with, the people I work with. We all want to work with great people. So there's a lot of emphasis on that. Do you have the right attitude when you work with people? Cross-functional leadership is something which I think everybody should invest in early on, right? So that's how we hire. I think if I were to look back, and Mark, you probably relate to this as well, is that one of the things I would strongly encourage people in the 5 to 6 years range of experience. I think that's a stage where you kind of get a feel of what you're doing. You're good at it. You want to grow. Do not hesitate to take risks. If I were to look back, that's one of the things I would really, really drive home is, it's too early in your career to kind of decide, this is what I want to do, right? Take risks, try new things, try to kind of not worry about, okay, if I take that path, will my next promotion be longer, right? And I think that we very often see very junior people getting obsessed about getting to the next level, etc. The emphasis should be on taking risks, learning new stuff, right? Because that is what will ultimately help you in the long term. Another thing which goes without saying, right? In our associate program, we have something called a rotation. So one of the things we do is that after 18 months of joining the associate program, you're encouraged to take on a completely new role. And one of the things you are also encouraged to do it is not just a new role in a new product area, but actually take a completely different new role, even in a different region. So when you hire leaders, in today's world, one of the things you really, really look for is that not just is it a person who can execute in one country, but do they have the ability to kind of understand how different countries work? So I would also encourage people, and I know that it's easier said than done, and there are various complications and things and factors you need to put in play, but take risk and also try to kind of learn from new cultures, try to get experience outside your comfort zone.
Right. A lot of what you said certainly rings true to my experience and how we approach hiring at Simply Learn. When I think of more junior to mid-level hires, whether you're a fresher or somebody 3, 4, 5 years out of school and getting into a career, we all want really smart people, right? We want people with sort of that raw talent set.
Yes.
And that's great. There's sort of not really a balance, actually. I don't really trade that off terribly much. But then you, depending on the role, want as much direct experience as you can get. But I find that the biggest indicators for success is, you mentioned it, the curiosity. Is this somebody who really likes puzzle solving and likes to think multidimensionally about a problem, and absolutely is willing to take risks, which also includes willing to ask a question which may seem stupid, or say, based on what I heard, I thought, this might be something that's impacting the business. That shows that they're, again, kind of holding up that prism and moving it around and trying to get a sense of it. And then, the risk taking, I think, is really interesting because at sort of a deep psychological level, some people are more fear-based.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a sense, am I afraid of the negative consequences?
Yes.
And that's a hard thing to overcome. But fear-based and sort of wanting control and wanting to present exactly the way you want to present is often very limiting in a career. So, if I find somebody, with the raw skills and definitely with the curiosity and a willingness to engage, then those are really great indicators for me that this is going to be somebody who's going to be successful. Now, having said all that, I think where it gets interesting when we start talking about international teams or even diversity, which really matters quite a bit, so there's a lot of cultural elements that come into that. So as an American who's now 4 years into a company that's most of our folks are in India, they're very different cultures, and so how willing you are to engage a senior person as a first interview and riff, it's that gets very tricky for both sides of the table, because the person who's going to be the most comfortable with me and maybe somebody directly from my background, and whether that's in the US and I'm hiring a different ethnicity in the US or I'm trying to hire across cultures, that's for me certainly still an ongoing learning curve, and a tricky part of it. I don't know if you have any sort of magic thoughts about how you approach somebody who clearly comes from a very different background and who you're trying to kind of break through and get a sense of how really do they think and operate.
Yes, and that is the point. That I think that's also the biggest skill set you learn early on by working and interacting with different cultures. So like it's completely indispensable in today's world, right? So and people often misunderstand the importance of diversity. The real need for diversity is it's only when you have diverse view you have good ideas. Otherwise, it's very easy to fall into your own echo chamber and make mistakes, right? So because you only seen that side of stuff. The point that you make is a very interesting one, because there are some societal norms which make some things very interesting. Like, for example, I've always been amazed at when I have colleagues who've had an American education, how confident they are on things like presentations. Whereas for many people who grew up in the East, including me, that was a learned skill. You had to kind of invest it and learn it. And you see,
confident in what? Sorry,
confident in making presentations, like in presenting for people, right. And like you see that it's very, very subtle. Now that I have young kids here who go to school, I see that you start very early in the US. Like you have things like show and tell in school, where you need to take a piece of rock and explain what it is, and you learn at a very early age how to do it, right? Which just kind of builds that confidence. Whereas if you don't have that, and if you have a different kind of education system, it is difficult. So I don't think there is a silver bullet, but I think as managers and people who are interacting and at different levels, like our CMO always tells that the most, and even at Google, like if you look at it, like the most senior people, the people who get to take really senior leadership jobs, are not the best engineers or the best product managers or the best marketers. They're good at what they do, but the skill set that they really have is what we call cross-functional leadership. Ability to work with people in different backgrounds, have a vision and bring all of them together, right? It's not just being the smartest engineer or smartest marketer. It's just having that skill set. And I would use the same bar for interacting with somebody from a new culture, is like lean in on the empathy aspect. It's easier said than done, but listen and be empathetic, and I think that is something which I've also learned the hard way, right? So you need to invest time and effort in that.
One thing I would add to that, particularly, I mean, at every stage of your career, people's first focus is managing up.
Yes.
So what does my supervisor, what does my manager want? How do I look good? How do I get things done? And obviously, you can't totally flub that, but actually, peer collaboration is massively important. And I think, I often see that kind of a secondary focus. So, I'll just make sure my manager sees me. I've got FaceTime. I'm hitting my goals. And, maybe I'm kind of ignoring everyone else and what they need to get done. But organizationally, first of all, it's what really makes the organization work. And over time, to build a body of success and projects that have worked and all that, more and more of that peer collaboration is how you grow and grow. Yeah.
Very
And that's
true.
a hard skill to learn too.
Yes, and you see, like companies, like one of the changes that we've had at Google also is we've always had 360-degree feedback, extremely important. But now, coming back to the topic that we discussed earlier, especially for managers, we have something called a people management report. So every people manager is evaluated on a periodic basis by their direct reports, and we pay, and it's measured on the attributes we feel are important for people leaders at Google, and we pay close attention to that, right? And in every discussion we have about promotion, giving people more responsibility, etc., it's not just important because it's exactly the point you said, like people instinctively manage upwards, but if you don't have the ability to kind of get your team and your peers along, you can't get to senior roles. Like you just can't, because we often joke, like, and you probably relate to it, like people feel that once you get senior, you have authority. I actually feel the opposite. You don't have much authority. You have very little authority, in fact, right? So it's about bringing everybody together. And that's a skill set that you need to invest and learn.
Right. And more teams are cross-functional, and
yes,
the initiatives are cross-functional. So you've got to be working on that big time. I want to sort of drill in a little bit on sort of progression here, because I know we're getting sort of questions there. So we'll kind of rapid fire this. We'll finish up with product marketing. If you think of, in the door. So we've talked a lot about, kind of recruiting and what we look for in people, but in the door, that first 3 years, getting up to a certain level, and then maybe beginning to manage people. Let's start with first product marketing, specifics, kind of skill sets that people should be thinking about to progress, that first 5, 8, 10 years, with a couple of milestones that they come to you.
Yeah. So we touched upon a few of those aspects, but again, like spend time in understanding your areas of strength. Early on in my career, I knew that like I was passionate about technology. Because of my engineering background, I was strong on the analytical side of the business. So that's what I invested in and build a little bit of a credibility and a reputation for being good with analytical marketing, understanding technology, and working with product and engineering folks. So I think everybody should spend some time in really understanding what is my core strength, what do I bring to the table, like that, and make sure that you're really, really good at that aspect. And then, of course, once you have that, that's when you then try out new things, takers, so that you can broaden your horizons. The second thing is from a product marketing perspective, I think, and for all marketing, I think one skill set which is very, very, very important is what I call storytelling. Like, and it's not just from a creative perspective, and I think that is something which I would encourage people, especially like me, who have a very strong analytical background, to also invest time in learning. Like it's the classic look. You have a product, you might be excited about it, but there is so much information out there. The person who's going to try your product has a million other choices. Why should they use the particular thing that you have to provide to them? What's the story? What's the narrative? Right?
So for you, or for team members, how do you help cultivate that skill? Is there specific research you do, or building personas, or whatever you found, kind of one or two things that help people begin to think about storytelling?
The phrase that we use at Google, especially and this is true could be for any technology company, and I would argue for any business in general, is like the first step is what we call we call it. It's a 3-step process: know the user, know the magic, and connect the two. All right, so that's what you do essentially in product marketing and most marketing. And what I mean by that is like invest in understanding your user base, your consumers, your business, like who is using a product. Understand provide a deep understanding. And this is not by doing just a consumer survey, right? Like you really need to live the life of the user and understand how they go about it. And there's no better way than like actually using your product, giving it a run, and all that kind of stuff. So be extremely good at knowing the user, because that is important. And then what we say by know the magic is that you also need to understand the product, what is it that you want to kind of build a story around, right? Like, and then the storytelling aspect is essentially connecting the two. Like, how do you kind of connect the user who you have a deep understanding with the product or offering that you have, right? And once you get into that mindset, I think the storytelling would come naturally. The other things which we all use, and I'm pretty sure, Mark, this is something which you have deployed, is the power of writing. Is like very often I feel that we are all in a rush to kind of launch stuff, but and this is again something which I've learned from very successful people at Google, is take some time. Like, what's your one pager? And this is not like, very often I think in companies today, there's a lot of emphasis in making pretty slides, but writing things down, putting pen to paper, that's a skill set as well, right? Like if you were to have a blog or a press release for the product you're launching, what would it be? Try writing that, write it down, look at it after 1 week. It'll seem rubbish. Rewrite it, and then perfect it. I think that's
so this is kind of a light version of Amazon, Jeff Bezos.
Absolutely.
Yes. For people who aren't familiar with this, in Amazon, if you're literally at the operating committee and presenting to Jeff and with a new product idea, you get one single page to present it, and then it's actually all oral, which is also the way Apple used to always run. No PowerPoint, no going, what's bullet point number 3? It's got to all be in your head, and it's all on one page. So it's kind of a version of that.
Yeah, I think PowerPoint, very often we all use, like I see PowerPoint being used as
it can be a crutch.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And and the point that you made, like I think Amazon takes it to the extreme. I think they do a fantastic job at that, which is like, even like 3 years before an actual product is launched, they make you write the blog post of what the launch would look like, right? So I think that is fantastic. But even if you don't go to that extreme, it's like, for the small area that you're responsible for, right? It's like, what would it be? Like, what is your one pager, right? Like, what's your it's the equivalent of what used to be known as the elevator pitch. Like, elevator pitch is too short, but I think and you can to a certain extent just trick that, but like trying to put a one pager is incredibly difficult.
Right. Elevator pitch is it's like Amazon, but for blah blah blah. That's a cheater.
Right.
Yeah. So let's switch actually probably to my sweet spot, which is more the acquisition marketing, and kind of the same thing as you think about. Again, there are so many discrete skills. That's an area where often people come in. You're a social media person, you're a content person, you're a PPC. I guess a little bit about how you think about entry-level people, and then how those people start to cross-pollinate and build more of a full-stack marketing kind of skill set and career.
Yeah. Look, all of the individual pieces that you called out are important. We are a digital-first company. That's what we do, digital advertising. So in any campaign that we do, we like, at least the initial part of it is completely based on digital advertising, right? So we want to make sure that you have a basic understanding of that. I think any person in today's world should have a basic understanding of digital marketing, how to use all of the tools at your disposal, be it social, be it like PPC, search-based stuff, etc., to drive usage and adoption of your product, right? So equally important is I think the world has completely made the switch to the mobile, and this is one of the mistakes I feel that we often make, is that because a lot of our interactions are still in the real world or over computers, we don't spend enough time obsessing about how small a surface area you have on a mobile, and how is it that you can make sure that your campaigns are very effective there, right? So attention to detail at that level is extremely important. The other thing is, and this is something which is ingrained to everybody in marketing at Google, is like ultimately data speaks. We can all have opinions about what works or not works, but once you measure it, you will have the ability to kind of understand the real deal. And along with that is the whole concept of making sure that you test and iterate. We live and die by that. Like Google is not a company where we wait till you have a completely polished end-to-end product, right? Because the market moves so quickly. So as marketers, you should have the ability to kind of launch something, test it, and iterate. That is critical.
So, and as again, you're learning those sort of broad skills. Google being Google, and also being a very large corporation. There's, I'm sure, lots of internal resources. How much is sort of formal training, sort of formal career tracking part of the progression? Again, from maybe somebody who's starting with one of these sub-disciplines and wants to become a full stack marketer or acquisition marketer.
So we have over the years invested in making sure that we provide adequate training on the basics, right? Like, how do you build a good media plan? One of the things that I would emphasize as an important skill set, I definitely did not have it when I joined Google, is how do you write a good brief, right? I think many marketers, we find that like you reach a certain, especially mid-level in your career, and you probably write your first brief and you read it and like it's not good enough, right? So I think any marketer, at least if this is the area, if you're passionate about marketing, you should know how to write a good brief, right? So
yeah. I've got to chime in on that too. And again, I come from more of a liberal arts background, and so it's a bit of a bias. But writing, it's not just could I write a novel if I wanted to change careers, but there's an aspect of it of really making sure your thought process is complete.
Yes.
And that's sort of the getting it on paper. And if you can get it on one page, all the best. There is now, I do see a lot with people who are a little bit more junior or haven't fully hit their stride, where they've got kind of 70% of the idea down and they think that that's it and they want to run. And they'd like to have a chunk of budget to go run.
Yeah.
And say, that's really not you need to be like 98% thought through.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean? Who's really the target? How are you differentiating, et cetera? So that's, writing is one way to get there, because it's, if it's all in your head, it's not, nobody can think through all the thoughts only in their head.
Yes.
So I think getting that down. Hey, so I'm going to be a little bit more tasky, just because I could selfishly take your time for the whole hour plus, and we do have a ton of questions. So for people out there, I apologize. I'm definitely not going to get through everyone's individual ones for sure, because we have literally about 40 or 50 of them now. But I'm going to sort of cherry pick ones that seem representative of what a lot of various people are asking, So, this is a basic one that I think we covered. Glenn Mary George is asking, when I attended an interview, the interviewer asked me, is your role more of marketing or product marketing? Is there a difference between these terminologies? And actually, I think this is a tricky question in some respects. How would you respond to that? So is your role more marketing or product marketing?
Yeah, look, again, it's difficult to answer that without understanding the company in question, because different companies approach it. But at a very high level, I think what the interviewer is trying to kind of ascertain is that, are you a generalist, or have you had the ability to kind of work in building a product to market? And so I think that is, for me, the fundamental difference.
Right. Okay, good. And so from Suraj, I may take a first crack at this. Do we need analytics background to get into digital marketing space? Analytics is the next buzzword, but how essential is it to do digital marketing? So I'll preempt you a little bit there. I would say it's absolutely critical, and particularly actually. So for me, I'll take PPC and SEM as an example. Throughout my many decades, particularly here in Silicon Valley, particularly if you went back a decade plus ago, that was one of the toughest roles to hire for, particularly somebody who had real expertise. I know things have changed now. Now it might be UX. There's a lot of other people, but still a very tough role. So I would end up actually hiring much more junior people in terms of fresh out of college or only with a couple years. Engineering background would be actually a great background, and it was all around: are you super analytical?
Yeah.
Because digital marketing in particular is all about funnels. It's all about segments. It's all about n-dimensional analysis of what you've done. So, is the creative the right creative? Have you done the segmentation right? Have you done keyword exclusion correctly? Are you bidding correctly? And you can't, if you don't have a deeply analytical mind. There's some aspects of marketing, like content marketing, where maybe it's not quite as analytical. But so that my answer is, whether that's formal training, it's certainly to understand. And also, I would actually say the concept of web analytics, and whether it's Google Analytics, it's a great place to start, and or even finish. But general concepts about web analytics, which gets you to page by page, what's on a page. What's a progression, what's the lead action, what are the events, time series. Having a real familiarity with web analytics is a foundation that would help you in anything related to digital marketing.
Yes. Couldn't agree more. I think it was a very, very comprehensive, and very often if you don't get the funnel right, there's no point spending money on marketing, right? Because if you have a leaky bucket, and we've all made the mistake, right? So which is why it's so important, as you said, to get the analytical part of it right.
Right. All right, good. So from Edmund, I just had the digital marketing specialist certification from Simplilearn. Thank you, Edmund. I studied PPC, social media, digital analytics, SEO. I find it difficult to decide which area to focus. Should I start doing all of it, or how do I focus? So again, everybody's question is in some case very idiosyncratic. I won't preempt you all the way through here, but I think the two things to think about, three things. One, follow your bliss. If there's an area where you just naturally find yourself spending more time, digging a little deeper, not walking away from your desk, then take that indicator to heart. The second is, depending on what geography and what you're seeing out in the market, it's certainly okay to start doing interviews across companies that could be for any number of those roles at an entry point if you don't have deep of experience, and kind of get the feedback. And then it could be as much about, are you interested in the company that's got the role that you want? And then thirdly, that you see a sort of a progression out of whatever that initial role is. So again, Sandeep, I don't know if you would add to that.
No, again, not much to add here. You said it, understand what energizes you, and of course you need to match that with the opportunities out there, because if it doesn't energize and excite you, you're not going to be good at it, right? So you're not going to give you 100%. So that is what you should focus on.
All right, good. So this is from Jitendra, and it's a long one, but it's a good one. It's basically about where digital marketing is going. We got mobile, we got artificial intelligence, we got automation, robotic, etc. So this is a very broad and really good question, but let's take sort of a 3 to 5 year time horizon. And I guess both in terms of things like the tool sets, like, MarTech and how MarTech is changing, or new platforms, or core fundamental things like AR, VR. Are there things that are already, Sandeep, on your radar and that your team's already beginning to think about, or actually changing some of their practices, your practices?
Yeah, so great question. like a couple of, and this is in no particular order, but a couple of things that come to mind is that I do feel that increasingly both AI and ML will have a profound effect on all fields across the world, and definitely in marketing, right? We are definitely using that, especially in terms of creative testing, creative suggestions. How do you kind of have like large scale multivariate testing? How can you kind of learn and understand what growth strategies work best? So rather than a marketer sitting and like drawing out each and every possible scenario, like what is the right amount of incentive you have for driving the perfect CPA, right? You could run like 50 tests for it, or you could have an algorithm which has the which uses AI and ML to kind of quickly come to an optimal solution, right? So I think those things are definitely going to happen.
So by the way, on that one, I actually think that for someone early in their career is a two-sided coin, because there is a lot of learning that happens from doing things manually. And if you're 22 or 24 and coming into particularly a leader like a Google, clearly is going to be in their own marketing a leader in deploying this stuff, and you just got a black box and you just hit the button and the button says that use that creative, or it doesn't even tell you, it just does it for you. You're actually not going to learn those core skills.
Yes.
And so it's actually a bit of a challenge, like for people right now. Don't wait for the black box. You want to understand like the basic concept that the black box is optimizing for, because otherwise it's all going to be very abstract to you. And
exactly, and like I also feel that like you can have the smartest machine, but it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So you need to know. You can have the smartest algorithm, but if you don't know the fundamentals of marketing and multivariate testing and like what you want to get out of it, I think you won't be able to get the most out of it, right? So very fair.
Yeah. AR, any other kind of things, like, I guess.
Again, this is a very personal view. I do feel that it will fundamentally change, but very often, and for folks like us who are in the technology industry, part of the challenge is how do you like Sergey, who's one of the Google founders, often used to say that like people often overestimate in the short term the importance of a technological trend and completely underestimate in the long term, right? And I think VR is a good example of that. You see all of these, and again, the fintech world with blockchain and etc. Another probably example. These things will have profound implications on how people do stuff, but it's very important also for folks early in your career not to have the urge to chase the what I call quote unquote the new sexy thing, because you feel, oh, there's this new shiny thing which I want to kind of do. I hear VR is cool, so let me just go and try to do VR. Like, resist the urge. I think all of these technologies will have profound impact in our lives in the years to come. But sometimes you do need to kind of give a technology some room to grow. Mark, this example, like people often talk about the successful iPhone launch, but nobody talks about the fact that about 15 years before that, Apple tried with Newton, and it was probably ahead of its times, right? So I feel that we are in that space now, when it's like in some of these technologies, but absolutely. They will have an effect.
Yeah, I agree with all that. So, I don't know if we'll probably go a couple minutes over, if that's okay with you. I think an area that everyone would also be interested in, and again, I know people have a lot of sort of specific career questions, and I apologize that we won't get to a lot of these. But part of your role and your team's role around payments, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on distributed ledger, blockchain, and kind of very briefly how that is actually coming to life in at least the payment space, and then to the extent that is at all kind of rippling through your marketing team and how they approach marketing. I think that would be really interesting.
I think it's related to what we discussed earlier, like, and Emma, you and I have had a brief chat about this before as well. If you were to look at technology and all of the areas that technology has impacted, it's completely changed how you buy stuff. It's completely changed how you navigate around this world. It's completely changed how you consume media. Technology, especially mobile and internet, is completely and software has completely changed a variety of ways in which we do things. Two areas, and this is not because we are in that space. Two areas I fundamentally feel where there is so much more technology can do. One, and I think the COVID pandemic is actually accelerating it, is online learning, education. Definitely a lot more technology can do in that area. And the second is fundamentally money, and that is what we are working on. Like, yes, there have been innovations in the past, but I often relate to the stage that we are in. People still use paper money, right? So it is very similar to if you think about, like, you had maps, paper maps for millennia, and it's very difficult to explain to young folks now how we used to navigate from one place to the other using paper maps and stuff like that, right? And
while driving, while on
yeah,
a steering wheel. Yeah, it's very
exactly.
dangerous.
Yes,
Yeah.
and like essentially what Google and other companies did is that you got like mapping data which was offline, you bought it online, and then you applied smarts to it, right? And you put data into it, and like if you think about a lot of the things that you see now, like even things like driverless cars, companies like Uber, Lyft, they're all based on that fundamental digitization of geographic data. I think there is a similar accelerating trend towards completely digitizing money. Yes, wire transfer and stuff like that has been there for ages, but the power of applying technology to money will profoundly change people's lives. That is what I'm excited about, what I do now and what my team's work is.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, I think we should commit to doing this every Thursday. I've got about another 10 hours of conversation to do. We barely got through some of the questions. I certainly hope for all those that have joined us that this has been useful. I know I've had a great time, and
Same here.
we could go on and on for several more hours. But Sandeep, we really appreciate your time, and excited to see what you and your team are going to do over the next couple of years, and look forward to using some more of those Google products.
Thank you, Mark. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope the participants also enjoyed it as much as I did.
Great. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Have a nice day. Bye.
And before you log off, I'd like to mention to everybody that we have another webinar next Thursday, September 24th. A leadership webinar, How to Become an Empowered Engineer, with Avital Arora, Vice President of Engineering at Salesforce. And we hope that you or your engineering colleagues will join us for that. Take care. And this concludes our webinar today.